Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks out there. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and welcome to this episode of Third Pillar Thursday. For those who don't know, Third Pillar Thursday represents the third pillar of RPG gaming. The third pillar of exploration deals with one of the three pillars of your general tabletop RPG games, with combat and social interactions being representing the other two pillars. And this week we decided to talk about food and drink. And I've been making pretty diligent in holding off some of our subject when it comes to adding in the idea of a significant amount of food and drink into our role-playing games. And I thought we would go back a little bit, just a little bit, into our archives and such, a little bit back before we've created in our setting a viable economics, I guess you could say, when it comes to using consumables in our role-playing games. And I thought we would talk about the action of collecting, hunting and gathering, to be specific, of our food items. And I thought we would go there. Now, for those who don't know, this show is simulcast over three platforms: Twitch, YouTube, and our Discord server. And if you could join our Discord server, in which you can, all of which you can participate both audioly and visually. You can do so on all three of those platforms, the Discord server being the most robust in terms of supporting longer forms if you want to participate live and take part even after the show has ended. All right, so the idea in for me in incorporating food and drink, of course, is it very easily mixes with a survivalist style game. And the survivalist style game a lot of times would require what we call, like, tracking the nuances. A lot of one of the long time tropes, and you'll have people who have split camps in this regard for tabletop role playing games, is the idea of tracking resources. Counting things, counting ammo, counting your rations when you go on a trip, and deciding how much detail you want to incorporate when it comes to camping out in the wilderness. And I thought we would talk about, like, adding some of these elements into our game, and adding them in to a very low fantasy and or using them in a high fantasy style of game setting. Now, I do understand, say, in the world's most popular edition of role-playing games, the fifth edition, Dungeons and Dragons, has added quite a number of easy buttons. There are class options and character options that allow you to automatically find your way through wildernesses to feed large groups of people, and player characters having access to rations and also magics that allow them to survive by creating their own food and drink, and even encampments on their way to and from the places of action, the dungeons, and those kind of things. But I will say that just because something on the surface seems easy doesn't mean there's no room to incorporate more nuance into your world. For example, let's say a character has the ability to automatically find food and drink for their friends and allies when they're camped out. It doesn't mean they don't encounter things. And remember, encounters don't necessarily mean looking up monster blocks. Encounters just mean that there is something out there in the world that they encounter, and that encounter could be anything from visual or audio cues. Maybe they see an old ruin, or they come across a gorge in a deep jungle. Maybe they come upon dead animals or victims. or they find lost items or even other individuals, NPCs that are wandering around. So an encounter doesn't need to devolve into combat and rolling a bunch of combat dice. It could be very social and, of course, explorative, meaning finding caves, finding directions, maybe finding something bizarre, or looking on the horizon and understanding that the weather systems might be changing, the landscape may have certain things, and of course giving clues for in your setting as to what the players may encounter later on. If they see a number of statues in the jungle carved and dedicated to humanoid serpents, maybe later on when the players finally confront Naga, Yuan-Ti, lizard folk, dragonborn, kobolds, and all the above combined together into some mishmash or what have you, led by a clan of dragons and whatnot, then you've already laid the groundwork for what they might encounter. You've foreshadowed the dangers ahead of time, and so exploring the world may give them clues in as to how to deal with them. Maybe there's some cultists and things like that. But when I feel like we can take this even further when it comes to food and drink. There are stereotypically there are very many tribalized things we could add into our game, and if you want to do a setting in which the player characters are all survivalist, they're all barefoot, loincloth wearing, running through the wilderness on their own, surviving on their own with style of game. I think this would fit perfectly into that, in the sense that maybe there's more to it than just hunting and gathering, but we can start from there. So one thing would be to have maybe specified things that can be gathered in the setting. So specified like nutrients to survive, maybe the gathering of specified herbs and other materials to herbs and other things, plant matter, seeds, bark, things out like honeycomb that you would find in insect hives, and nectar, what's the stuff you get out of a tree, like sap and syrups and things of that nature, to allow the player characters to gather those items for their benefits. Now, you could do this in any number of mechanical ways, like, for example, gathering, I don't know, the purple pits from a plum tree or something may allow the players to engage some of their character class options, or even specify kind of spells, or maybe it's just a gathering of a number of these items that you record on your character sheet. If you have 10 purple pits, that each pit is equal to one ration. And yeah, unfortunately, sorry there, dead man. I've got the way that I broadcast, I can't see any of the animations or videos. It's just it's a quirk. I I don't mind, but I see what you're showing. Yep, it's very slow. Okay, I get it. Yeah. Now, something else that's also possible to do when it comes to like the hunting and gathering thing with like finding, I don't know, like the little animation there, dead man, with like finding like say a rabbit's haven, or I don't know, a badger's or beaver's dam or something like that. It could be just trying to find things out in the wild that might have been collected by other things out in the wild. Like, yeah, num 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 num, chewing on something. So, an example would be like the player characters need to find a local, like, rabbit or field mouse to follow it to get to find something else, right? Or they need to, they hear the buzzing of insects, and so, okay, well, we hear the buzzing of the insects. That means the hive's close, so now we've got to go find the hive to get the honeycomb out the hive. Now, I'm not suggesting that this all has to be like present day, modern survivalist techniques, but I'm saying like we could turn the volume up to 11, especially when you have, I don't know, dog to elephant sized insects. You might be able to. The PC's dungeon might not be a traditional square dungeon with locked keys, but the dungeon might be, say, the abandoned subterranean hive of giant ankhegs or ants or wasps or bees or something like that. Like I could imagine a giant beehive being the size of, oh, you're hanging from a giant tree, the size of your local castle and whatnot. Maybe the PCs have to use methods to coerce the insects and ride maybe on the giant insects' backs or something to get to where they need to go. So you can have some pretty fun elements when it comes to using and exploring the environment, especially if you divorce yourself of using a flat plane, but go vertical with it and turn the volume up. Also, when it comes to gathering, not only do they have to find those elements, though putting those things in locations that might be very, very difficult to get to is an option, and having to deal with the act of having the stuff in the first place. Some things have a certain smell or scent. Maybe they stain. They could be very dangerous, allergic, acidic, necrotic, or something. They could also also spoil quite easily. So gathering the golden fronds of the sunduster flower, they might only bloom at a particular time in the morning. Then they have to gather those items. And of course, they grow on the side of cliffs, so you got to do that and grab them off the side of a cliff. And then once that happens, maybe they need to be dried or ground up or rolled or burned or steeped, boiled or whatever the case may be, dipped in salts or whatever the case is, before they, I don't know, turn to dust and rot away before the noon sun, right? So you could establish some other kind of tension modifiers. Always having your ability to have a toolkit filled with tension and pressure is always great as a dungeon master or game master. So your tension modifier could be time. You know me, I always mention time, energy, and resources. And so, although I suppose culture might be the fourth one in that triumvirate, but time is very important. How long does it take to do something? Once something is done, how much time do you have to complete a task when you have other things to do? So if the player characters are hanging off the side of a cliff to gather, sundowner flowers and these golden fronds, and they're also being pursued or attacked by enemies, where do they split their attention from, especially when the fronds are just blooming because the sun is about to come up? So that's one option. Also, adversaries, enemies, beasts, monsters, and things of that nature might be awaiting the PCs because everyone knows that just as the sun comes up, people are gathering these things off the side of cliff sides. So those scaled humanoids that I mentioned previously might be at the top and or bottom of, say, a cliffside, awaiting, the lowly travelers to try to collect these things because they're very important for their culture. So, and then there's the energy in recovering such a thing. Not only does it take time to, say, climb a cliff to get the things off of there, there might be quite a bit of energy to expend. Energy, whether it is splitting your attention, getting to the place, avoiding exhaustion and stress, and then of course resources. What kind of resources are you expending? Like how many rations are you eating to get to the thing to try to recoup some of your rations, right? So when we get into hunting, that's an important thing too. So for example, let's say there are tribalist people in a savanna hunting down an elephant to kill it. They're also expending energy to kill the thing, to go after it. And so player characters may, I could imagine an open air dungeon, much like a hex crawl, which technically a hex crawl is a dungeon. It's just shaped in hexagonal pieces and is larger, but essentially each hex you go to could be reinterpreted as a room in a dungeon. Each hex having its own things and being manipulated or influenced by the previous hexes. But basically a hex crawl is a dungeon itself. So if the players are out in the wild hunting something down, they could also be gathering things for their use. For example, a player character may have skills with poisons, and in order to create certain types of poisons, there are certain types of fronds, seeds, barks, saps, etc. The consumption of insects and smoking them, using them when they're alive, a snaking and gathering the venom from a snake by doing the imagined holding over the plastic or the the material, and you take the fangs and you poke it through and you kind of melt the the venom into the jar or whatever. I mean, I think that's kind of a cool story thing to do. And of course, if you're doing that, you have to handle the poisonous thing in the first place. And if you're doing that, trying to do that under pressure because of external weather events, things like that. Now, I'm not getting into the weather events because you guys know I always talk about that on Third Pillar Thursdays. But flowing into hunting things down, I think is another thing. Of course, player characters are going to kill stuff. So in a survivalist style game, killing things is par for the course, right? Hunting down dinosaurs. I know some people hate dinosaurs in their fantasy gaming, but whatever. Hunting down great and powerful monsters that are beasts in your world may be necessary. And killing them, of course, anything that has sentience, you want to kill those things too. And so doing that out in the wild might be very important. But the act of hunting something down, instead of it being the thing to hand wave, because let's be honest, a lot of this has been hand waved away in darn near most role-playing games, unless you specifically find a game that is wrapped around survivalist gameplay. So it may take utilizing a muscle that has been atrophied for quite some time in a lot of tabletop role-playing games. But the idea of again, using discovery to find evidence about a creature, tracks, footsteps, broken limbs, scaled creatures leave behind skin. There are nests. There are types of things that it eats. There are territories. Maybe it marks its territory with a scent or a spray or scratches and markings on trees and limbs and things. So many animals produce evidence of their passage, and so player characters may need to gather that evidence first to even find the thing, and then based on the behavior of that thing might move far faster than the player characters. It might be flying or swimming or burrowing or something. So the player characters may need to triangulate where it's coming at it from many leagues away, and then converge in on it. They may need to, are they upstream, downstream from it? Are they upwind or downwind? Are they trying to, maybe there's more to it than just killing it, although killing it probably would be very important, but tracking it down, running after it, being able to corner it or triangulate. The PCs may need to triangulate their way around the beast or creature or something, and of course they of course go through the process of killing it, and then even that can create its own problems. Kill something out in the wild, then that means that creature now is decomposing the minute you kill it, and so that could become its own hazards, bringing in many types of carrion creatures, maggots, flies, hives of insects, the scent spreading, blood seeping into the ground, carrion birds circling overhead, the PCs being stained with whatever it has. Some creatures leave behind. All of you out there who's ever been in a region where a skunk is sprayed, you know it's not always good. Just because you kill something doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't leave an aftermath. Skunk spray is quite horrible over many miles distance, and so it's possible that a creature lets out, say, a screech or calls for danger, or there are other groups out there, sentient groups that are antithetical to the player character's goals that might be parallel hunting as well, and also being marked as prey by creatures, especially if they travel in packs or something like that, or having the player character's sense get marked as well. So now, mind you, it we don't need to kill everything out in the wild as well. The collecting of eggs from birds' nests, the collecting of skin. Maybe there's an animal that deposits something because of its passage as well. Again, we don't necessarily need to have everything dead. For example, cat gathering. Yep, and there's. I am not a hunter, so I'm going to let you know up front that I've never hunted. All of my stuff is armchair, naked and afraid, and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I get all of my survivalist knowledge from, self-admittedly. But like Pet Ogre talks about tanning an animal, there are. First of all, we know that we can utilize every single part of an animal that's killed. We know that already. No matter what animal is killed in our real world, you can utilize like 99.9% of all of that animal. How long it takes you and what you use is very dependent on your gaming world. Maybe there's something to kill, and all the PCs are trying to do is gather a single gland out of a giant beast or something, right? There are, like, we understand that there's ivory hunters. They kill elephants just to get the ivory from them. They kill rhinos just to get the horn. But there are also other communities that, yeah, they kill those same creatures, but they use everything. They smoke the meats. They tan the hide. They make weapons out of the bones. They use I'm going to call it gristle, and I know that's not what it is, but they use some of the fibers in the creature to create like threading and fibers and stuff. The internal organs are used as like the bladder and stomach and things are used to be cleaned, and then they use those as water skins and stuff. You have the sinew. Thank you very much, there, Tesla. For yes, exactly. The sinew is used. The bone. Lots of it are used. The bones are used for cultural events. How many times have we seen the bleached skulls of a bull or a goat or something used? Maybe those horns and bleached skull is used as a symbol of success. And a great hunter might keep the hide or the skin or the claw or the teeth of a thing to show how many kills they've had, and to use that as a form of status and survival, and hell, maybe even some gaming mechanic, right? Like your druid or ranger or reskinned wizard as a shaman or something in this world. You want those third level spells, you're going to need a third tooth to add to your necklace or something. I mean, you could do this quite easily if you want to make this mechanized, or just honestly, I would just make it narrative. And drinking after the great kill, we take the blood from the heart, the still warm heart, and put it in a bowl and mix it with some other, herbs and spices, and pass it around the campfire, or taking the fingers into the blood and marking the face or arms or whatever. I mean, that might, if you want to create a world where there are no civilized, every society is nomadic, let's put it that way. Not that they're not civilized, but they haven't settled, let's say. And the player characters might be part of a group that doesn't settle, and they travel. And it could travel by wagon or mounted beast, which is another thing too, that you could really include in a like survivalist hunting for food, food and drink, maybe even trying to find clean food and water sources. So finding a stream of clean water, finding a brook or a fountain or something like that might be very necessary as well, especially to keep wounds clean and that sort of thing. And of course, uh, Dead Man says, see Borderlands 3, Kylie, Or nope, Keef or Keefe. Mose says, hate it, can't stop eating it. Turns out it's balls. Yeah, maybe some people like to. Come on, kitty. Yeah, I hear you. Maybe there are some, 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 some might find it a delicacy. Others might find it pretty nasty. Portions of particular animals. Now, of course, the player characters may not be by themselves, so the killing and tanning of a particular animal, you know, getting pelts and gathering eggs and et cetera, getting those gathering those things might be trade items to again garner some other things. Maybe the other survivalist things like salts and spices and other trade items that the players may need. For example, a local community might make lots of alcohols, but of course they don't move around a lot. But if you go out there, hunt, bring back 7 pelts, they may trade with you a couple of jars of their local, you know, honeyed mead or something like that. But what I think would be really cool is the idea that hunting is the goal, right? Like instead of hand waving away the survival part to get to the dungeon, the dungeon is the world. This dungeon is the exploration of the jungle or the desert or the mountainous region or the Grand Arctic and such. And so when the player characters are trying to hunt down winter wolves, like maybe those winter wolves are making a run for it. So the player characters have to run across frozen tundra, lakes and icebergs and you know frozen waterfalls and blizzards and crevices and all those kind of things, making forcing the player characters to engage in the world, not just vertically but horizontally, and then the things that come with it. Maybe they come across one of those ratty old rope bridges again. I love myself some rope bridges, and needing to cross it to get on their way. Or there's a particularly dangerous creature, especially ones that can burrow or fly, or they're particularly violent, or they roam in packs or something. And heck, you can even have a triumvirate encounter. PCs go after, are hunting down a Pegasus, and because the Pegasus has a nest or something with a one of its younglings in it up in the mountains, it is, I don't know, jungle-fied region or something, and then the PCs get surrounded by a pack of saber-toothed tigers on their way to go after the Pegasus that's flying through the air or whatever, you know. Rickard says environment food could be migrations. The the Tagora goats are a great source for food, but their food is the quake worms. So they migrate to the regions that will be hit by the earthquakes, serving both as an ill omen and a food source. Oh hell yeah! The confluence of things that the player characters don't prefer, but their prey does, could be a thing. Like you said, an earthquake, maybe certain types of volcanic activity, a certain type of weather event, like torrential rains bring earthworms out the ground, but it also means the player characters are now going to have to trudge through mud and overflowing raging rivers and torrential downpours because the prey that they're following loves to eat those earthworms or something, right? Like you said, something hit by an earthquake. The earthquake is an ill omen to human beings, but the mountain goats who easily survive, you know, the shaking of the mountain and the falling of the rock slides and things might be just waiting for something to come out of the ground. And they're like, oh, great, cool. Quake worms, love eating these things. Munch, 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 right? Yeah. Certain types of, some timing might be beneficial to the prey, but inconvenient for the player characters as well when it comes to something like, oh, we need to get through the mountain pass before the snows hit. But once we're through the mountain pass, we're going to be stuck because it takes another 3 weeks before the golden fronds actually bloom, right? So if we wait to go through the mountain pass, it's going to be too treacherous for us to get through it. But on the other hand, if we go through, we have to go through early. Now we have to go through early and then get trapped back there to await this other event to happen, you know? Rickard says earthworms no problem. It's worse when it's purple worms that get pushed to the surface by the rainstorms. Yeah, yeah. You know me. Turn the volume up to 11, right? A little earthworm you put on the end of your fish hook, no big deal. Multi tens of thousands of ton purple worms that can consume whole communities, pushed up by rainstorms and stuff. Hell's yeah. Yeah, Pet Ogre's like, it's got to be one hell of a rainstorm. Maybe it is. Maybe that's the case, right? And and again, there might be some synergy between the the food, the food source, the player characters, the prey, and the predators. Meaning, like okay, one of my favorite creatures, which of which I don't like the name, is the boulet, right? The land shark, right? And it burrows through. It's the subterranean predator equivalent of like a panther or something on the surface, okay? And maybe they are quite dangerous, but they also lead the player characters to the purple worms in the first place by following their burrows. So there might be a dangerous predator out there that the player characters need to live, like they can't just kill it, to follow it or track it or use it to triangulate what the PCs really need to get. Yeah, I hear you there, Pet Ogre. There's got to be one hell of a rainstorm. Maybe it's not so much a rainstorm. It's a rain that end all rains. It's like an end times rain. Although that's not necessarily true. If purple worms are in underground around with, maybe there's a lot of aquifers or something living where they at, so the purple worms are already near the surface. It could just be a matter of it could just be like Rickard's mentioning migratory. It could be a natural. Remember, lots of animals do things other than just stay still and sleep, right? They breed, they migrate, they build nests, they are gathering their own foods, they are affected by environmental changes, heat, cold, weather, that kind of thing. Maybe they are moving to a greater or better, more nutritious food source from where they're at, and so that transition, salmon swimming uphill, I mean upstream, uphill. Geez, well, I guess technically it is uphill with water on top of it, but salmon swimming upstream is an example of it, right? The salmon don't want to be captured by bears, but they are also on a mission to spawn, so they swim upstream to go spawn. So that might be a thing the player characters are measuring in, depending on the season and the region that they're in. And of course, we're doing role playing games, so we can turn that volume way the hell up into 11, where it's volcanic season or something like that. Yeah, Tesla says the worms come to the surface because they breathe through their skin and don't want to drown. Yep, exactly. A worm the size of a purple worm might have actual lungs because of its size, though. Yeah, oh yeah, well, breathing through its skin to the size of its ratio might seem like a very simple thing. For us, we might get sucked into its lungs because it's so damn big, right? And of course, purple worms might actually be, I don't know if they feed their own young, but you could claim that they feed their own young. So maybe even the larger worms might not drown, but the smaller ones will. So we can play with it as well. I mean, hell, next week we're going to talk about calderas, which has its own problems there. So yeah, there could be depressions that fill in with water, and of course rivers that overflow cause maybe like alligators and other kind of predators that might be in the water. There's also prey in there as well for fish, things like that. Ricker says another environmental food issue is pollen. Some say you have those golden fawns or fronds that give out food with fantastic properties like healing powers and such, etc. So they are farmed, but their pollen is highly, highly toxic. If not kept in check, the pollen on the farms might wipe out the village, and wild golden fawns don't have anyone to keep the pollen from spreading. Yeah, I love the idea of like mixing the two. Like, it's not just a matter of, oh, golden flower good, black flower bad. It might be the golden flower good, the golden pollen bad, or leaves good, nectar bad, or bark good, but what's I was going to say nectar. Bark good, but the syrup or sap is bad, or it could be very trans. Please, the allergies. Jesus, that picture. Yeah. Thanks, Rickard. Yeah, the pollen, and you can see in that image. Well, you guys can't see this unless you're on the Discord server, but Rickard posted in the Discord server an image of like basically like clouds of pollen so thick it's as thick as like fog. And so again, playing with the environment, I love, you guys know I love the environment. And so are those dandelions? I didn't want to claim that they were dandelion. That was a field of dandelions. But yeah, you can have pollen and waves of insects, fog, torrential rain, blizzards and snow, high winds, sandstorms. All those things can be layered on top of the environment itself. And like you said, that pollen could be allergic, meaning having breathing problems. That pollen can attach to something. It could be acidic. It could have an allergic reaction on the skin. And so yeah, it's somewhere about to spore out. And it might be very dangerous, even. Like, for example, collecting the fronds might be all right, but disturbing the pollen could be its own hazard. Maybe the pollen draws in some types of outside influence. Maybe the pollen again is very poisonous and dangerous to the community, especially for breathing problems or increasing the chances of gaining exhaustion or the trouble it causes by trying to wipe the stuff off and clean your body off because of it. Tesla says rhubarb stalks are edible, but the leaves are poisonous. Yeah, hell, cherry pits, right? Cherries are delicious. Cherry pits have, I believe, cyanide in them. So, and there's even certain types of plants that we eat that are, when they're ripe, they're good. When they rot, they become bad. Is it arsenic? Oh, Dead Man says arsenic. Yeah. There is something else out there that has a lot of cyanide in it. He said cherry pits have the arsenic in it. But of course, if you consume too many of them, again, like many types of crops that you used to be able to gather out in the wild. You know, I got to bring up butt weasel coffee. All right, I already brought it up. All right, we're done with that. But the idea of like say tobacco, or even hell, even coca leaves and for coca for chocolate, or cocaine, poppy seeds that where heroin is made from is a type of plant. Yeah, Deadman says apples have cyanide in their seeds. Yep. So there could be multiple uses for something that's collected, and there might be a time frame involved in it too. For example, maybe the player characters don't have time to create to dry out the leaves of this special golden frond, but if they spent the time to dry it out, they can then make a concoction by using like a pestle and mortar to dry it, turn it into a powder, add that to a stew, and then that becomes the healing potion, you know? Rickard's like, so Tarask butt coffee? I don't know what it's eating to then crap it out that you'd have to go through its own mounds of crap or something. Although I could see insects living in Tarask feces mounds. Like I could see was Ankegs living in mounds of feces left by a Tarask or something, like a giant kaiju walking around on an island or something. That'd be awesome. Tesla says bananas are radioactive. You have to eat about 400 pounds of them for it to be dangerous. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, there are some things that, sure, they're dangerous, but like, could you really suffer from them? Not particularly. Deadman says generally, if they have one seed in a fruit, it will have arsenic in the seed, and if it has a bunch of seeds in the middle, has cyanide in the seeds. Ooh. Yeah. Rickard says, yeah, eating the whole coffee shrub. Yep. And Deadman says water is usually radioactive as well, especially if we go back to our arcanium idea with like a radioactive arcanic arcane material, much like uranium, but it's magical or something. So when it also, I think, while we're out there in the wild, we could, again, we're talking about killing things and gathering its bones and organs and muscle tissue and using its meat to survive on. You, on one hand, you could be very specific, like, I don't know, a manticore grants certain abilities or something, and if you gather the bits and pieces from the manticore, you can do a thing. Now, you could be very generalized with it, like killing the beast allows you to use your player character options a certain number of times or a certain percentage of times. In There's an OSR game called the Black Hack, and they have something called a usage die. And the usage die is basically like, instead of tracking everything like I have 17 arrows left, instead of doing that, what you do is when you use the item or at the end of an encounter, you roll a usage die. And that die might be a d6, a d8, d10. And if you roll a low number, with the Black Hack, if you roll a 1 or a 2, that die reduces down one. So if you have a d10, you roll a 1 or a 2, it becomes a d8. If you roll that again for using the item, it drops to a d6. And there's nothing below a d4. If you roll a d4, you roll a 1 or 2, you're done. So you could attach some kind of like usage to when the player characters go hunting. So, hey, we're going to go hunting today. Okay, make a roll. Oh, you're successful. Okay, your resources are now a d8. Right? Like, you could do something like that. And the reason why there might be a randomizer in there, of course, is that maybe things, it could be due to losses, due to trying to gather or hunt something that might be diseased. Player characters could very easily kill an elk and then find out that it's diseased and it's worthless, or something that they're carrying around was rotted away, or that becomes poisonous, or its usefulness is not at the level that they need it to be, even though what they've gathered might be maybe instead go into a trade item or something like that. Rickard says arcane bomb fruits. They are soaked with arcane energies, and you can harvest them for great boosts in arcane related activities. But it's as twitchy as old nitroglycerin. Yeah, yeah. I love that idea that like my, it's not my fireball or magic missile or something. It's like it's little small seeds or fruits that I gather together and throw them, and they do a thing. It could be like instead of charm person being psychic, it could be I pull out a puff of dust or something and blow it into the wind, and it charms the person. Like, you could really reskin, re-flavor, reuse a lot of these things. I love it. I love it a lot. Dead Man brings up stuck on that trace radioactivity. Minute traces of radioactivity are normally found in all drinking water. There's also the DuPont company has also placed a lot of background things in most biological life in the world is too. So yeah, having like some kind of like background radiation, arcanic radiation seeped into like fruits and seeds and roots and bark and leaves and things might be where the player characters are able to gather some of their magical capabilities. Like I mentioned earlier in the week, maybe there's some kind of like necrotic flower, and only if you gather 5 uses of the flower, you now have 5 uses of necrotic spells, as an example. That golden frond that's dangling on the side of that cliff face might allow you to use healing and radiant sourced spell-like effects or something. It could be very, very sympathetic magic to do a thing. If you wanted to get that that deep into the weeds, right? Rickard says, so if you walk through a forest of them while they have become ripe and they start falling from the trees, yeah, it could. The idea that something is just as dangerous to you as you are to it, like, hey, I want to get those grenade fruits, and the PCs are like, you go ahead, dude, because I'm not doing it. One idea might maybe the magic spells that are listed in the game aren't spells at all. Maybe they are natural parts of the world. They're living spells. Like a I'm trying to think as go off on a different spell thing here. Okay, a glyph the glyph of warding spell might be wrapped around a certain type of fruit. And so you have to navigate the trap of the natural fruits to gather it together for yourself, and you might not want to fall prone, right? Once you put it in your backpack or something. Ogre says, but then again, you also have the related fruit that allows a limited and very temporary polymorph if you get smeared in the juices. So they're fun for the kids. Yeah. Especially when one kid's like, I always get changed into a field mouse. Rub, rub, rub. Hell, we know that in stereotypical tribalist cultures, we see like carved face masks, tattoos, both permanent and painted. We've seen carvings on walls and stuff. Putting the two together, like all your spells, is like painted on your body and tattoos. Hell yeah, hell's yes. Magical face masks, carved face masks that allow you to become a certain thing, you know. And if you put on a tiger face mask, you become a Black Panther, you know, giant saber-toothed tiger, etc., right? Having the teeth of certain animals or around your neck as a druid only allows you you gather your own repertoire of your own wild-shaped animals. I think that's a very easy and cool thing to do as well. Sorry, you guys go on to say, Rickard says, could be that when they explode, they send their seeds and spores, etc., so far away, so the exploding part is part of its spreading. I guarantee you, isn't there something that does that? I swear there's something that actually does that. Maybe not on the level of sending out like high explosive fragments, but I believe there is something that drops from trees and explodes on purpose. So yeah, you're right. Just it's not meant there to harm the PCs. It's there to spread the pollen or the spores or something, which could be its own hazard. Like, hey, I've collected the seeds that could explode. Okay, so I collect the seeds. I use them as my magical grenades. But when I throw them, they release spores, the spores having their own effect, which could be a side effect that happens to your enemy, or the side effect is that it sends up a scent or causes rapid growth of this particular dangerous plant. It could be acidic. It could be something that could be very easily traced by other predatory animals. And I think one thing we tend to forget in these kind of encounters is like using like a lot of pets and animals, man. Using flocks of birds and trained hunting dogs and riding on, you know, lizard mounts and things like that, I think should be added into this kind of using the environment, using what's around you, hunting things down, dragging it back to a community. Which I'm going to end on that part about the community part. Yeah, Pet Ogre says they throw it at each other, turning into children-sized dragons. Sheep ogres, yeah, yeah. Maybe certain tribes consume certain things that cause a transformative polymorphic thing to them. Like, I could imagine a distant island where we think they're filled with nothing but different races, but really they all come from the same human stock, but because of the things they consume, either because of it's a cultural norm, it's told to them by the elemental gods or the elders. It could be just the magic that consuming these things makes them powerful, but it also turns them into lycanthropes or trolls or ogres. And so it's a taboo to consume the black fronds or the black ambrosia or whatever the hell it is, because it is a transformative thing that turns you into I don't know, into an ogre. But of course, the tribes that are ogres are like, hell, we've got power over you, buddy. Yeah, we might not be intelligent, but we can beat ass, right? So Ricker said, quote, did you say you had a bag of the arcane exploding fruits? You know what a chain reaction is, right? Are you carrying the bag on your back? Which, absolutely, right? You could make the gathering of your... Okay, imagine your spell and spell-like abilities. You are carrying every one of those. So if you've got a couple of magic missiles in your... You don't even have to notate each one. But let's say your spells, your spell slots are... You've got 12 spell slots. So you're carrying around 12 items. And whenever you get into certain types of trouble, maybe you might lose some or drop them or have them stolen or they rot away or they spoil over a particular amount of time. So you have to re-up the things that you're carrying. And when you reach in to use one of your slots, you're actually reaching in to grab a thing. Or you might be very specific. You've picked up 3 exploding fruits. Somebody got a crit on you. All right, roll the dice to see if 50-50 chance of one of the fruits exploding. Boom, it explodes. Yeah, that means 75% chance the second one explodes. Boom! All right, 100% chance for the third one. Yeah, you might not want to do that. Which of course, maybe handling your resources requires you tying it up in a tree or hiding it in the hollow of one of those mangroves in the local swamp or something, or tying it to the backpack of your mount, while you go out with your hand carved spear and bow or tooth sharpened dagger or dagger like tooth or something as you go out there. Yep. It's like, nah, you just throw the whole bag at the big baddie of a guy. Here, catch it. Yeah, that's too. That too. Unless you're wrong and the thing loves to eat those exploding fruits. It just gobbles them down. You just see a big puff of pollen, like poof, yum, and you're like, uh-oh. Ooh. Now, lastly, I think when it comes to gathering food and drink, not just for the player characters, but tying it back to a community, maybe, just maybe, you use, like, let's say you use the long rest option from the Dungeon Master's Guide. Like, now, I know that long rest is like a short rest is 8 hours, a long rest is a week. That's brutal, right? But maybe if you have an encampment, your encampment allows you to reduce those down. So we know a short rest is an hour, long rest is 8 hours. But maybe there's some middle ground in there. So if you establish an encampment, so let's say, follow me on this. Short rest 8 hours, long rest a week. But if you make an encampment, you go out to the wild, you're out there with your allies, you make an encampment. You have like lean-tos and makeshift tents and things like that. So if you return back to your encampment, maybe instead of a short rest being 8 hours, it's 4 hours. And instead of a long rest being a week, maybe a long rest is 3 days. Okay, so now you pack up your encampment and you go back to your tribe, your nomadic tribe. Maybe it's called a settlement. So we're going to call it a settlement instead. And maybe the settlement lasts 3 months to 6 months or what have you. Maybe it moves along a migratory path. But once you create your settlement, it's semi-permanent, right? It's next to a stream. It's located under an overhang, like a makeshift cave or something, and it lasts for 3 months. Maybe that settlement, instead of the short rest being 8 hours or 4 hours, maybe it's only 2. And maybe the long rest, instead of a week or 3 days, now a long rest is 24 hours. And then lastly, the nation that the PCs come from, that is a permanent location that does not move, maybe there, short rest hour, long rest 8 hours, and things like that. That makes it quite a bit complicated in terms of that stepped level to tiers and such. But I think you could play with that two-tier system, four-tier system, like I just spouted out or something. That could be very important as well. Also, the idea that the player characters are bartering, trading with people, right? They may go out there and gather these dangerous things not because they can use them, but because somebody else can use them. So when the player characters get, skin these giant lizards or something, maybe they have no use for the organs and the meat and the skin and the sinew and all the things that, I don't know, the sap that they've created, the dark fronds, the golden flowers. Maybe none of that is useful to the PCs, but it is extremely valuable and useful for the things, trade items they can trade for. So maybe the one player character is some kind of herbalist, but where they're located, there's nothing there to create the poisons they want. But if we bring back enough bones or ivory or smoked meats or flesh of the thing or furs or something like that, they bring it back. They go to a location where they meet up with other tribal folk. They trade those items. Maybe they meet up with like shamans and sages and witch doctors and whatever other types of nomenclature you want to add into it. That is far more, I guess we would call like pre or equal to or pre sword and sandal era kind of survival things, and then in that way the player characters may be able to garner back their so-called spell slots and their class capabilities in, say, a Dungeons and Dragons type of world. Mind you, if you're using another role-playing game, it's very easy to reskin and reflavor a lot of these things as well. For example, let's take your classic Dungeons and Dragons Paladin, right? We know that in the 5th edition, Paladin doesn't mean what it means what it used to be. A Paladin basically is an oath taker. But classically, we think of Paladins being like armored, silver armor, long swords, hell, even shields and lances. But reskinning and reflavoring it, get rid of the word paladin and just call them oath takers. And an oath taker could be someone that wears, a loin cloth and, gathers their things from the wild, and change the idea. Just weapons don't really mean much of anything in role-playing games, right? So a spear could very easily be a cleric's weapon or a paladin's weapon or something out in the wild, right? Why not, And so the idea that, for example, you may want to reflavor what armor and shields are. Shields are very easy. A shield you can make out of hide, turtle shells, crab shells, and hell, and a beetle shell. Like you could do those for when it comes to wearing armor, like the hide, leather, chainmail, scale mail. You could make those and just reskin, reflavor them. So scale mail could be made out of, well, real scales. It could be made out of a certain type of bark that's gathered. Chainmail might be. I saw this image. I can't tell you where I saw it from, but you could link maybe the heads of ants are gathered and the mandibles are linked together to make like chainmail shirts out of the linked mandible heads as the little mandibles linked together or something, or whatever. Chainmail could be made out of like woven teeth or something. Like you could very easily have shells, seeds, beetles, whatever, seeds or anything like that, that maybe something is smoked or oiled or treated or lacquered or something to create something more of a hardened, armored look. And mind you, again, Dungeons and Dragons is very cinematic. It is very narrative in its depiction of what things do. Weapons don't cause bleeding damage. They don't impale things. They don't cause gangrene. They don't do any of those things in the game. So armor, for example, we don't have rules for helmets. We don't have rules for bits and pieces and baubles. They're just words. So the fact that I know there's a difference between a breastplate and a chain shirt in reality, but gaming wise, there is no difference. You wear a thing and you have that armor class. So maybe wearing just a simple a woven item that is abreast of your character is all that you need to acquire, say, the armor class of a particular defense. And so you might even include some things that are more exotic in your world. For example, certain types of the bones from a certain type of animal relate to a specific type of protection or armor. I'm missing. Where am I? There we go. Maybe there's a certain type of skin of a particular type of animal. Okay, someone in Twitch that's pretty rude there. Hey, thanks, Dead Man. Yeah, I don't know why people have bots that do things like that. So anyway, but you guys get where I'm coming from in terms of using the environment, layering things, adding things to something. I know we've gone past our hour mark, but I also want to say that there are lots of predators out there, animals out there that utilize the environment and even change the environment for their own purposes. We talked about purple worms. Purple worms dig tunnels. So you now have a built-in dungeon for tunnels, and those tunnels might be filled with of course, droppings, skin, other tribe people going into those tunnels. Other, much like a classic image of a water buffalo with a bird sitting on its back, there might be some synergy between very large animals and very small animals. A purple worm that has a number of insects on its skin eating at it, both of those creatures might be in a synergistic relationship, right? Purple worm doesn't eat the insects. The insects keep the purple worm's skin nice and, I don't know, not smooth, but you know what I mean, helping to get rid of barnacles or whatever on it. What's an under subterranean barnacle called? Maybe eat certain types of minerals, so that might be a thing. I brought up badgers and beavers. They create dams, birds make nests. Lots of, like mites. Maybe the mites eat away at the dead skin, so there's always like a fresh, it eats away at like maybe the rotted skin, so that's able to do a thing. Scaled animals get rid of their skin. So like lizards and snakes will shed their skin. They even hang out on like hot rocks because they are cold-blooded creatures. So sentient lizard folk may hang out on rocks and things like that. Kaiju mites. Was that in Pacific Rim? Did they have kaiju-sized? Kaiju attented mites or something? But yeah, like what's the classic fire beetle? The old OSR fire beetle might cover. There might be dozens or even thousands of these little things living in purple worm havens because they both live off of each other, right? So you can have that kind of synergistic relationship, as well as the fact that lots of animals do things because they need to get to something. We know that lots of marsupials will use physical items to open up things. Like I believe crows and ravens will use rocks to open up shellfish and such, or to break open seeds. So there might be, taking that and turning the volume up to 11, it's possible that certain creatures cause landslides, or certain creatures dam up rivers, or hell, you might even have something that starts fires or whatever to get at what it needs to get at, But what is it? The Ankh spits out acid. So there not only could there be evidence, but they could also be transforming the environment itself. And of course, a lot of these animals have movement rates. Embrace those movement rates. Does it have a swim, climbing speed, flying speed? Then it's going to absolutely positively use that to its advantage. It's why birds live in trees, right? Yes, they could make a nest on the ground, but why? They are going to fly to where they need to go. A creature with a climbing speed or jumping distance or something might live in a vast gorge or whatever. And of course, it will defend itself in those places and or lead prey or predators towards its safe location. Giant spiders are a perfect example of it creating its own environment to use for its own benefit and stuff like that. Deadman says kaiju mites ate the dead skin on the kaiju. Yep, yep. So anyway, guys, it is 7 o'clock. I have to get out of here. I will be leaving you guys pretty shortly. Thank you very much for joining me. Tomorrow is Future Friday. Everyone out there, thank you very much. Here we go with our outro. What is going on here? Outro music. Sorry about that. Guys, have a great one. I will see thee later. Bye. Something's happening here. And we are out. Thank you very much. See you later. Bye.